The credit terminal's cheerful chime felt like a death knell echoing through Marcus Kane's cramped apartment. The holographic display showed a debt so astronomical it might as well have been written in a foreign language, one that spelled financial damnation, in every dialect across the galaxy. 6 months ago, he had been the most promising engineer in the Solar Coalition's development program. Now, he was a pariah whose name appeared on every corporate blacklist from Earth to the Outer Rim. His crime? Refusing to stay silent when he discovered his department head selling military-grade shield technology to the highest bidder, including known terrorist cells. The whistleblower protection laws were a joke within a week of his testimony. Marcus found himself buried under fabricated debt charges, his credentials revoked, and his future obliterated by a system that rewarded complicity over conscience. The doorbell's soft tone interrupted his brooding. Marcus opened the door to find a courier drone hovering at eye level, its crystalline form shimmering with an opalescent sheen that marked it as Catherine technology. The drone extended a slender mechanical arm, presenting him with an elegant data slate. Marcus Kane of Earth, the drone spoke in a melodious voice that seemed to harmonize with itself. You have been selected for consideration in a binding indenture contract with the noble house of Keth. Do you accept reception of this proposal? Marcus stared at the slate, his hands trembling slightly as he took it. Indenture contracts were rare, often whispered about in the dark corners of spacer bars. Desperate arrangements between failing alien nobility and humans, seeking escape from impossible circumstances. He had never imagined he would be desperate enough to consider one. I accept reception, he said quietly. The drone's lights pulsed once in acknowledgement before it dissolved into motes of light, leaving him alone with the contract that might represent his only path to freedom. The proposal was written in flowing Catherine script that seemed to shift and dance across the screen, but the translation was clear enough. The House of Keth, once powerful traders whose influence spanned 3-star systems, faced financial ruin. They required an engineer capable of maintaining and improving their aging fleet of vessels. In exchange for his expertise and a formal marriage bond with the eldest daughter, they would absorb his entire debt and provide him with a new identity, free from the corruption charges that had destroyed his life. The marriage would be purely ceremonial, a legal formality required by Catherine law to transfer his debt obligation. He would have quarters aboard their flagship, a generous stipend, and the opportunity to work with technology centuries beyond anything Earth had developed. It seemed too good to be true, which in Marcus's experience meant it probably was. But what choice did he have? The alternative was debtor's prison on a mining colony where the average life expectancy was measured in months rather than years. He pressed his thumb to the contract's biometric scanner, watching as his financial history dissolved and reformed into a single binding agreement. Within hours, he was aboard a passenger transport heading for the Andorian system, his few possessions fitting easily into a single travel case. The journey took 3 weeks, each day stretching longer than the last, as Marcus tried to prepare himself for whatever awaited him. He researched Catherine culture obsessively, learning about their complex social hierarchies and the binding ceremonies that tied noble houses together. What he couldn't find much information about was the House of Keth itself. Their recent history seemed strangely absent from public records. The transport finally docked with the Stellar Wind, the House of Keth's flagship, and Marcus got his first glimpse of his new home. The ship was enormous, easily the size of a small city, but even from the docking bay, he could see signs of wear and neglect. Scorch marks along the hull told stories of battles or accidents, and several external sensor arrays hung at odd angles, clearly in need of repair. A single figure waited for him in the docking bay, tall and elegant, with the distinctive features of Catharan nobility. Her skin held the soft luminescence typical of her people, pale green that seemed to glow from within, and her hair fell in silver waves to her shoulders. She wore robes of deep blue that marked her status, but her expression was cool and distant. "Marcus Kane," she said as he approached, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species. "I am Nerita Keth, eldest daughter of this house. You are precisely on time. The contract specified this arrival window," Marcus replied, studying her face for any hint of what she thought of their arrangement. "I assume punctuality is valued in your culture." "Punctuality, yes. Along with duty, loyalty, and the ability to honor one's obligations." Her golden eyes swept over him appraisingly, taking in his simple clothes and worn travel case. "I trust you understand the nature of our agreement? A marriage of convenience to satisfy legal requirements for debt transfer. I provide engineering services. You provide financial relief. Clean and simple." A smile touched Nerita's lips, but it held no warmth. "You misunderstand, human. Our bonding laws are not as simple as your research has led you to believe. When you bind yourself to the eldest daughter of a noble house, you bind yourself to the house itself." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, 3 other figures emerged from the shadows of the docking bay. Each bore the same distinctive Catherine features as Nerita, but with their own unique beauty. The first had skin of vibrant jade green and hair like burnished copper, her posture suggesting barely contained energy. The second was taller than the others, with skin of deep ocean blue and hair as white as starlight, radiating an aura of calm strength. The youngest was petite, her skin a soft violet hue, her dark eyes sharp with intelligence. "Allow me to introduce your other wives," Nerita continued, her voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. "Tavia, our primary pilot." The jade-skinned woman nodded curtly, her expression openly hostile. "Solara, our security chief." The blue-skinned woman remained motionless, but Marcus felt the weight of her evaluation. "And Rhea, our treasurer." The violet-skinned woman tilted her head slightly, as if calculating his worth down to the last credit. Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. "Other wives?" The contract mentioned 1 marriage bond. "The Catherine bonding ritual is absolute," Nerita explained, her voice matter-of-fact. "When you marry into a noble house, you marry the house. All of it. Congratulations. Husband, you now have 4 wives and a failing interstellar trading empire to help maintain." The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications that Marcus was only beginning to understand. He looked from one face to another, seeing hostility, suspicion, and calculation in their eyes. None of them wanted him here any more than he wanted to be here, but they were all trapped by circumstances beyond their control. Tavia was the first to speak, her voice sharp with disdain. "This is what we've been reduced to, sisters? A primitive human from a backwater planet? He probably doesn't even understand quantum harmonics, let alone our propulsion systems. He understands enough to have impressed the contract evaluators," Rhea said quietly, though her tone suggested she wasn't particularly impressed herself. "His credentials, before the blacklisting, were quite remarkable." "Credentials on paper mean nothing in space," Solara added, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life-and-death decisions. "We'll see what he's truly made of soon enough." Marcus straightened, drawing on the confidence that had once made him one of Earth's most promising engineers. "The contract grants me authority over all technical operations aboard your vessels. I'd like to start with a complete systems evaluation of this ship." Tavia laughed, a sound without humor. "You want to inspect our technology?" "Human. Our engineering is centuries beyond anything your species has developed. Then it should be in awe. Educational experience for all of us," Marcus replied evenly. "I'll need access to all maintenance records and cooperation from your technical staff." Nerita studied him for a long moment, something flickering in her golden eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. Tavia will show you to the engineering sections. Try not to embarrass yourself too badly, husband." As the group began to disperse, Marcus caught Nerita's arm gently. "This arrangement, it's not what either of us wanted. But we're bound to it now, and I intend to honor my obligations. I hope we can find a way to make this work." For just a moment, her carefully controlled expression softened. "I hope so as well, Marcus Kane, for all our sakes." The engineering deck of the Stellar Wind was a masterpiece of Catherine-designed flowing curves of bioluminescent metal that pulsed with soft blue light, creating an almost organic-feeling space. Everything was beautiful, elegant, and according to Marcus's trained eye, running at barely 60% efficiency. Tavi stalked through the corridors ahead of him, her jade-colored skin seeming to glow with barely contained irritation. Every few steps, she would gesture dismissively at some component or system, her copper hair catching the ambient light as she shook her head in obvious disdain for her unwanted companion. "This is the primary fusion core," she said, stopping before a towering cylinder of crystalline material that hummed with contained energy. "It powers everything from life support to our quantum drives. I suppose to human eyes it looks primitive?" Marcus circled the core slowly, noting the elegant power conduits that branched from it like the roots of some great tree. He pulled out a handheld scanner, one of the few tools he'd been allowed to bring from Earth, and began taking readings. The numbers that flickered across the display made him frown. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. "But you're losing nearly 30% of your power output too. Inefficient energy cycling." Tavia's golden eyes flashed with anger. "Impossible. This core was designed by the greatest engineers of our house. It's been running perfectly for over 2 centuries. Running, yes." "Perfectly?" Marcus showed her the scanner's display. "Look at these thermal readings. Your cooling systems are fighting against the natural harmonic resonance of the crystal matrix. Instead of working with the energy patterns, your regulators are trying to force them into artificial stability. You've been aboard this ship for less than 3 hours, and you think you understand technology that took our ancestors generations to develop?" Tavia's voice rose, echoing in the vast space of the engineering deck. A new voice cut through their argument gravelly and skeptical. "What's all this commotion about?" They turned to see a Catherine male approaching, his skin bearing the darker green hue that indicated age and experience. His forearms moved independently as he worked on multiple tasks at once, and his lower pair of eyes remained focused on a diagnostic tablet while his upper pair studied Marcus with undisguised suspicion. "Jorik, this is the human," Tavia said with obvious distaste. "He claims our fusion core is flawed." Jorik's mandibles clicked in what Marcus was learning to recognize as Catherine laughter. "A human. Critiquing Catherine engineering. What's next? A quantum fish trying to teach us about swimming?" Marcus ignored the insult, instead moving to one of the diagnostic panels. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, he began pulling up system schematics, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface with surprising familiarity. "The base design is brilliant," he continued, highlighting various components on the display. "But look here, the phase regulators are operating on a fixed frequency cycle. Your core wants to pulse in natural harmonics, but you're forcing it into a steady state that requires constant energy expenditure to maintain." Jorik approached, his skepticism wavering as he studied the schematics Marcus was highlighting. "The regulators maintain stability. Without them, double quotes. Without them, you'd get power fluctuations, yes. But what if instead of fighting those fluctuations, we worked with them?" Marcus's fingers flew across the interface, creating a new configuration. Adaptive regulation let the core pulse naturally, but capture and channel those pulses through synchronized timing. You'd get power bursts instead of steady flow, but the overall output would increase by at least 25%. Tavia leaned over Marcus's shoulder to study his work, and he caught a hint of her scent, something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. Despite himself, he found it distracting. "This is theoretical nonsense," she said, But her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Even if it worked, which it wouldn't, the power fluctuations would destroy our navigation systems. Not if we buffer them through capacitor banks, Marcus replied. Store the excess energy during peak pulses. Release it during low cycles. The navigation systems would actually get more stable power than they do now. Jorik was quiet for a long moment, his four hands pausing in their work as he studied the proposed modifications. Finally, he looked up at Marcus with something approaching respect. It's elegant, he admitted grudgingly, but untested. If you're wrong, you could destroy the core and strand us in deep space. Then we test it on something smaller first, Marcus suggested. Do you have a shuttle or maintenance pod I could work with? Tavia's expression shifted to something that might have been curiosity, mixed with challenge. You want to modify one of our shuttles with your primitive human technology? I want to prove that sometimes primitive solutions work better than elegant ones, Marcus replied. If I'm wrong, you can space me and tell Nerita I died in an unfortunate accident. If I'm right, if you're right, I'll consider the possibility that humans might be slightly more intelligent than quantum fish, Tavia said with a sardonic smile. The shuttle bay was cavernous, filled with sleek Catherine craft that looked more like works of art than functional vehicles. Tavia led him to a smaller maintenance shuttle, its hull scarred from years of hard use. This is Seeker, she said, running her hand along the ship's flank with obvious affection. She's been with our family for over 50 years. If you destroy her I won't, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. But I'll need some basic materials and tools. Earth standard if you have them. For the next 2 days, Marcus worked virtually around the clock, stripping out the shuttle's elegant but inefficient power distribution system and replacing it with what could only be described as organized chaos. He used conduits scavenged from storage, power couplers that looked like they belonged in a scrapyard, and control circuits that would have made a Catherine engineer weep. Tavia watched him work with growing fascination. His methods were crude by her people's standards, but there was an undeniable artistry to the way he solved problems, finding elegant solutions with primitive tools, making connections that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Where did you learn to do this? She asked on the second evening, finding him elbow-deep in the shuttle's engine compartment. Necessity, Marcus replied without looking up. On Earth, we don't have access to self-repairing crystal matrices or quantum-coherent power conduits. We have to make do with metal and wire and a lot of ingenuity. It must be frustrating, being so limited. Marcus paused in his work, considering her words. Sometimes, but limitations force creativity. When you can't rely on perfect materials, you have to find perfect solutions. He emerged from the engine compartment, his shirt stained with lubricants and his hair disheveled. For the first time since he'd arrived, Tavia saw him not as an unwanted obligation, but as a man competent, dedicated, and surprisingly attractive despite his alien features. It's finished, he announced, wiping his hands on a rag. Want to take her for a test flight? Tavia's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of a born pilot. Try to keep up, human. The shuttle's cockpit was cramped with both of them inside, their shoulders touching as they strapped into the pilot's seats. Tavia's fingers danced across the controls with practiced ease. Bringing the engines online, the first sign that something was different was the sound instead of the usual gentle hum of Catherine technology. The engines growled with barely contained power. And came the acceleration. Tavia gasped as the shuttle shot forward with twice the thrust she was expecting, pressing her back into her seat with a force that made her pulse race. The power readings on her console showed impossible numbers energy, output that should have been beyond the shuttle's capabilities. This is ... double quotes, she began, then abandoned words entirely as she threw the shuttle into a spiraling dive around one of the stellar wind's massive engine nacelles. The little ship responded like a living thing, dancing through space with an agility that made her laugh out loud with pure joy. They flew for an hour, Tavia pushing the modified shuttle through maneuvers that should have been impossible for a craft its size. Every system responded perfectly. The crude human modifications somehow harmonizing with Catharan technology in ways that defied conventional understanding. They finally returned to the shuttle bay. Tavia sat in the pilot's seat for a long moment, her hands still gripping the controls as if reluctant to let the experience end. The power output increased by 38%, she said quietly. Fuel efficiency improved by nearly 40%. And the response time ... She shook her head in amazement. It's like she became a completely different ship. Marcus smiled, the first genuine expression of happiness she'd seen from him since his arrival. She was always capable of this. She just needed someone to help her realize her potential. Something in his tone made Tavia look at him more closely. In the soft light of the cockpit, she could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, but also the satisfaction of a job well done. This man had been broken by his own people, cast out and sold into what amounted to slavery. Yet here he was creating miracles with nothing but determination and skill. "Marcus," she said softly, using his name for the first time without mockery. "What you did to Seeker, could you do the same for our main ships? Given time and resources, yes. But it would mean completely reimagining your approach to power distribution. Your people think in terms of perfection and stability. Sometimes you need to embrace a little chaos." Tavia was quiet for a moment, studying his profile in the dim light. "And what about us? Our arrangement, I mean. Can you embrace the chaos of being married to 4 women who never wanted a husband?" Marcus turned to meet her gaze, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with possibility. "I'm starting to think," he said carefully, "that maybe none of us really knew what we wanted until now." Their faces were close in the cramped cockpit, and Tavia found herself noticing details she'd missed before the flecks of green in his gray eyes. The strong line of his jaw, the way his mouth curved when he was thinking. She had spent 2 days watching him work, seeing his competence and dedication, and something had shifted in her perception of him. "Tavia, Marcus began, but she silenced him by placing a finger against his lips. "The others need to see what you've done here," she said, though her voice was slightly breathless. "Nerida especially. She's been carrying the weight of our family's failures for years, and she needs to know that maybe, just maybe, we've found a way forward." Marcus nodded, though he made no move to pull away from her touch. "And what about you? Do you need to know that?" Tavia's golden eyes searched his face, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I need to know that the man I'm bound to isn't just another burden for our family to bear. And Marcus, you're not. You're something else entirely." She leaned back, breaking the intimate moment, but the change in her expression was unmistakable. Where there had been hostility and suspicion, now there was curiosity and something that might have been the beginning of attraction. "Come on, husband," she said with a smile that transformed her entire face. "Let's go show your other wives what you can do." The Calder's asteroid field stretched before them like a graveyard of shattered worlds, chunks of rock and metal tumbling through space in patterns that had taken millennia to establish. It was treacherous, unpredictable, and exactly the kind of place where a desperate trading house might find the rare minerals needed to keep their creditors at bay. Nerida stood on the bridge of the stellar wind, her luminescent green skin pale with stress as she studied the navigation charts. The asteroid field held deposits of trilithium ore worth enough to buy them another 6 months of operation, but harvesting it would require threading their massive ship through a maze that had claimed dozens of vessels over the years. "The automated probes confirmed the deposits," Rhea reported from her station, her violet fingers dancing across holographic displays. "Trilithium concentration is even higher than our initial scans suggested. But the field's gravitational patterns are unstable. Define unstable, Marcus said, moving to stand beside Narita. Over the past week, since his success with Tevia's shuttle, the sisters had begun including him in their strategic discussions. It was progress, though he could still feel the weight of their collective skepticism. The larger asteroids create gravitational eddies that shift randomly, Narita explained, her golden eyes never leaving the display. What appears to be a safe passage can become a collision course in minutes. We've lost 3 mining expeditions here in the past 5 years. Tavia's voice crackled over the comm from the pilot station. I can thread us through the outer perimeter, but once we're deep in the field, we'll be committed. If something goes wrong, we can't afford another failed expedition, Solara added grimly. Our reputation can't take it, and neither can our finances. Marcus studied the swirling chaos of the asteroid field, his engineer's mind already working on the problem. What if we don't take the whole ship in? A smaller vessel could navigate more easily, and we could use the stellar wind as a relay station. The mining equipment requires industrial-grade power coupling, Narita said, shaking her head. Only our main ship has the generators necessary to run the extraction systems. Then we bring the power to the mining site, Marcus suggested. Tethered energy transmission through superconductor cables. The ship stays in stable orbit while a shuttle deploys the mining equipment. The sisters exchanged glances, and Marcus could see them weighing the proposal. It was risky, but potentially less risky than taking their only ship into the field's chaotic heart. The power loss over that distance would be enormous, Rhea pointed out. We'd need perfect efficiency in the transmission system. Leave that to me, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. I've been studying your power systems. I think I can solve the efficiency problem. Narita was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the command console as she considered their options. Finally, she nodded. We'll try it. But I'm going with you on the mining shuttle. If this fails, I want to be there to see it firsthand. Narita, that's not necessary, Marcus began, but she cut him off with a look. It's my family's future at stake, and my decision to trust your judgment. I'm coming. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Marcus worked feverishly to modify the power transmission system, stripping components from throughout the ship to create a superconductor cable capable of carrying the massive energy load required for mining operations. It was delicate work, requiring precise calculations and flawless execution. Narita found herself watching him work, noting the intense focus with which he approached each problem. There was something almost meditative about the way he moved, his hands sure and steady even when dealing with technology that should have been completely foreign to him. She had spent years managing their family's decline, carrying the burden of every failed venture and disappointed creditor. Watching Marcus work, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. The cable's ready, Marcus announced, stepping back from the massive spool of gleaming superconductor wire. It should maintain 96% efficiency over a distance of 50 kilometers. Should? Narita asked, raising an eyebrow. Will, Marcus corrected with a tired smile. It will maintain efficiency. I've triple-checked every connection. The mining shuttle was cramped with both of them aboard, along with the automated mining equipment and the precious power cable. Narita took the pilot's seat while Marcus monitored the energy systems, their shoulders touching in the confined space. As they descended into the asteroid field, Narita's piloting skills became apparent. She guided their small craft through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, her movements smooth and confident, despite the constant threat of collision. Marcus found himself admiring not just her skill, but the way she looked when she was completely focused, the slight furrow of concentration between her eyes, the way her luminescent skin seemed to glow brighter when she was intent on a task. There, she said, indicating a cluster of asteroids rich with trilithium veins. That's our target. The deposits are concentrated in the central asteroid. The landing was harrowing, the shuttle's feet making contact with the spinning rock, just as a neighboring asteroid passed close enough to scrape their hull. But they were down, and the mining equipment began its deployment automatically. Power coupling established, Marcus reported, watching as the cable began feeding energy from the stellar wind to their mining operation. We're getting full power transmission. The extraction should take about 4 hours. They settled into wait, but the asteroid field had other plans. An hour into the mining operation, proximity alarms began shrieking as a massive chunk of rock tumbled toward their position. "We need to move," Narita said, her hands flying over the controls. But the shuttle's engines wouldn't respond. "The landing struts are locked, probably damaged in the landing. We can't lift off." Marcus was already moving, grabbing an emergency toolkit and heading for the shuttle's maintenance hatch. "Keep trying the engines. I'm going to see if I can free the struts manually." "Marcus." "Wait," Narita began, but he was already cycling through the airlock. Outside the shuttle, the asteroid's surface was a hellscape of jagged rock and treacherous gravity. Marcus could see the approaching asteroid looming larger by the minute, its massive bulk promising certain destruction. The landing struts were indeed damaged, bent and wedged into crevices in the rock. Working frantically with cutting tools, Marcus began freeing the struts one by one. But the work was slow, and the approaching asteroid was moving faster than he'd calculated. He could hear Narita's voice over the comm, urgent and worried. "Marcus, you need to get back inside. Now." "Almost done," he replied, sweat beading on his forehead inside his helmet as he worked on a final strut. "Just a few more seconds." The strut came free with a grinding shriek of tortured metal, but as Marcus turned to race back to the airlock, a chunk of debris from the approaching asteroid struck him in the chest, sending him tumbling across the surface. He bounced once, twice, then slid toward the edge of a deep crevice. Narita's horrified scream echoed in his helmet as she watched him disappear from view. "Marcus, Marcus, respond." He was alive, wedged in the narrow crevice about 10 meters down, his suit's integrity holding, but his left arm twisted at an unnatural angle. Above him, he could see the shuttle's lights and hear Narita's increasingly frantic calls. "I'm alive," he managed, his voice strained with pain. "But I can't climb out. My arm's broken." "I'm coming down," Narita said immediately. "No, you're not. An asteroid will be here in minutes. You need to take off now." "I'm not leaving you. Narita, listen to me. The family needs you. Tavia, Solara, Rhea, they need you. I'm just the hired help. You're my husband." The words burst from her with unexpected force, surprising them both. "You're not hired help. You're part of us now. Part of me." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the growing rumble of the approaching asteroid. Finally, Narita spoke again, her voice calmer but no less determined. "I'm activating the emergency beacon. Tavia will come for us." "The shuttle will be destroyed," Marcus protested. "Then we'll be destroyed together. I won't abandon family." In the crevice, Marcus felt something shift in his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. Family. When was the last time anyone had considered him family? "Narita," he said quietly, "in case we don't make it out of this, thank you for giving me a chance to belong somewhere again." "We're going to make it," she replied firmly. "Both of us. I didn't bury a quitter, did I?" The asteroid field around them erupted in chaos as the massive rock struck their mining site. But somehow, their small section of the surface remained intact, protected by the larger asteroid's gravitational shadow. They were battered, but alive. Tavia's voice crackled over the comm, tense with worry. "Narita, I'm coming in fast." "Is Marcus?" "He's alive," Narita said, tears of relief streaming down her luminescent cheeks. "We're both alive." The rescue was harrowing. involving emergency cables and precise maneuvering that only Tavia's exceptional piloting could accomplish. When Marcus was finally pulled from the crevice, his broken arm stabilized in a medical brace. Narita didn't let go of his good hand for several minutes. Back aboard the Stellar Wind, with the trilithium ore safely stored in their cargo holds, the family gathered in the medical bay where Marcus was recovering. His injuries weren't severe, a broken arm and some bruising, but Narita hadn't left his side. The mining operation was a complete success, Rhea reported with obvious relief. The ore will cover our debts for the next 6 months and provide operating capital. All thanks to Marcus's power transmission system, Tavia added, her earlier hostility completely gone. No one else could have made that work, Solara nodded her approval. You risked your life for our family's future. That shows honor, but it was Narita who spoke the words that mattered most. You said you were just hired help, she said softly, her golden eyes meeting his. But you're wrong. What you did out there, staying to free the struts, ensuring the mission succeeded, even at the cost of your own safety, that's not the action of an employee. That's what family does for each other. Marcus squeezed her hand gently with his good one. I'm beginning to understand that, he said. And I'm beginning to understand what I really signed up for when I agreed to this marriage. And what's that? Narita asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A chance to find something I thought I'd lost forever, he replied. A home. The look that passed between them was charged with something deeper than gratitude or obligation. It was recognition, the acknowledgement of two people who had found in each other something they hadn't known they were missing. Tavia cleared her throat, breaking the intimate moment, but smiling as she did so. Well, if you two are done having a romantic revelation in the medical bay, we have a celebration to plan. Our first successful operation in months deserves proper recognition. As the sisters filed out to begin preparations, Narita lingered beside Marcus's bed. The crisis in the asteroid field had stripped away the last of her careful emotional defenses, and she found herself seeing him not as a business arrangement, but as a man who had chosen to risk everything for her family's future. Marcus, she said quietly, when I said you were my husband out there, I meant it. Not because of the contract, but because I want it to be true. He reached up with his good hand to touch her luminescent cheek, marveling at the way her skin seemed to glow at his touch. I want that too, he said, more than I thought possible. When she leaned down to kiss him, it was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as they both realized this was the moment their arrangement became something real, something chosen rather than obligated. Outside the medical bay, three sisters exchanged meaningful glances as they heard the quiet murmur of voices that had shifted from business partners to something much more intimate. Their human husband was becoming part of their family in ways none of them had expected. And perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly what they all needed.